What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, May 20th, 2019, start of a brand new week with all kinds of stuff going on. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Sam is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and opinions. And before we get into the news here, if you are living in the southern Great Plains, please keep your eyes on those windows out there. Yesterday and today, they're having major storms and tornadoes. Apparently, they have had at least 38 tornadoes that touched down since last Friday. And they're expecting more today, so just something to keep your eyes out there. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what's going on with Iran. And there was a lot of tough talk last week, and it's sort of flitting back and forth. Trump really doesn't seem all that enthusiastic about it. And we know that the reaction of the world to this, credible intelligence of an Iranian threat against U.S. forces in Iraq was not, shall we say, well received by the rest of the world, who are still remembering how they all got bamboozled back with Saddam's nuclear weapons and Assad's sarin gas. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So basically, there's a lot of pushback against a new Iran misadventure, coming from countries like Russia, Japan, China, and the EU. And basically saying that, there's little support around the world for a war with Iran. And, back in 2003, when the U.S. went into Iraq screaming nuclear weapons, countries just sort of went along with it. Now they're being a little bit more cautious and skeptical. So, and basically they're saying a ground invasion is virtually impossible or would be very costly. So what they're looking at is if the United States attacks Iran, it's going to be an aerial bombardment. They're just going to go on in and flatten the place. It's one thing the United States is really good at. They can flatten cities anywhere in the world. And if you go back and you look at the photos of all these countries the United States has gone into, and you find photos of before and after. And before, they're beautiful places, they're built up, they got a good standard of living, and afterwards, when the United States has declared a victory for democracy and humanitarianism, the places, they're in rubble. Now, there's another point of view coming on over from Global Research up in Canada saying they see little hope that Europe will stand in the way of a U.S. war with Iran. And I tend to agree. There's a lot of rhetoric out there saying that, you've lied to us before and we're really not on board. But as far as actively saying, no, we don't want you to do that, I don't think it's going to happen. Europe's got so many of its own troubles it's trying to deal with here. Over in Great Britain, they're advising all citizens holding dual British and Iranian nationality to avoid traveling to Iran, saying they faced an unacceptably higher risk of arbitrary detention and mistreatment compared to other nationals. Note the word arbitrary, because there's really nothing arbitrary going on. Okay, the advice not to travel to Iran came after Iran said it had sentenced an Iranian woman who worked for the British Council Cultural Agency to 10 years in prison for spying for Britain. Well, if you spy in another country, bad things can really happen. Now, everybody's starting to take this similar posture. We don't want war. Well, really? We don't want war? I mean, we're such peaceful people over here. But by golly, if we have to, we will. And Saudi Arabia is the latest one to hop on this piece of propaganda saying they don't want a war, but they will not hesitate to defend itself against Iran. This is a top Saudi diplomat saying yesterday. And again, they're talking about these drones that hit the pumping stations. So Adel al-Jubeir, the Saudi Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, spoke a week after these four oil tankers, two of them Saudi, were targeted in an alleged act of sabotage off the coast of the United Arab Emirates, and days after Iran-allied Yemeni rebels claimed a drone attack on a Saudi oil pipeline. Now, those 4 tankers, act of sabotage, not very effective. None of them sank. They didn't even list. Just this little tiny punch in the hull, which probably has already been repaired. But he's out there saying the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia does not want war in the region and does not strive for that. But at the same time, if the other side chooses war, the kingdom will fight this with all force and determination, so forth. And see, this is the way wars have to be sold. You know, the other guy has to start first. That's why Roosevelt goaded the Japanese for an entire year before the attack on Pearl Harbor. Just poke, 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 get the other guy to do something provocative, and then say, oh, they struck first, we must respond. Because that's a much easier war to sell to the American people than just getting up there and saying, you know, I feel like we should go to war with China and just steal all their stuff. Now, over in Israel, there's this top Israeli rabbi who's close to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, rented lips, and he said the rollout of the Iran war by the Trump administration was a total disaster. And he claimed that Mike Pompeo and John Bolton are the culprits in their, quote, ineptitude in getting America involved in the war, end quote. So they're saying new plans are now underway to shift the narrative and rebuild trust in the American media by positioning them as seemingly anti-war. And a new false flag scenario is being put together so that next time this happens, America will get on board. Well, they're telegraphing. It's going to be a new 9/11. We're going to do a shout out now to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And there was an incident over the weekend where a Katyusha rocket crashed into the Baghdad green zone. It hit about a mile from the embassy. It hit dirt. No damage, no injury, whatever. And the Iraqi forces were able to locate the launcher. It was in a field just outside the city. And the problem with trying to cite this as an attack by Iran is the Katyusha is a home-built rocket. There's no factory that makes Katyushas. They're built in people's garages, along with the use once, throw away launching stands, which is just these wooden rails. So there's absolutely nothing to say who actually built and launched this rocket. But I'm sure they're going to say, oh, it had to be Iran, couldn't be anybody else but Iran, which is a ridiculous statement. There are a lot of people in the Middle East who do not like the United States of America being there, and that includes Iraq itself. Iraq has spent the better part of the last 16 years under U.S. military occupation. And time and again, U.S.-Iraqi relations have come to be defined by U.S. hostility toward neighboring Iran and Iraq's desire not to get caught up in that conflict. So apparently Iraq will soon be voting on a bill that would aim to expel all foreign troops from Iraqi soil and singles out U.S. troops in particular as needing to leave. The bill is endorsed by Iraq's top 2 Shiite blocs and is expected to pass fairly easily. I imagine that will be the case. So that'll be interesting to see what the United States does after that. You know, you're under military occupation. We don't care what you want. We're going to stay. Because if there is going to be a ground war in Iran, it's going to be launched across that very long shared border between Iraq and Iran. Over in Syria, apparently there were several unidentified aerial objects flying over Damascus in the southern part of the country. In both cases, the intercepted targets came from the southern Syria border near the contact line with Israel. Now, some sources speculated that the Syrian Air Defense Force was repelling Israeli strikes. However, no explosions were reported in Damascus and the countryside, as well as pro-government sources were not able to present any vestiges of intercepted missiles. So nobody is exactly sure what happened. Now, Syrian TV is saying that Damascus was targeted from the direction of Israel. And they showed footage of the night sky with a point of light firing up into it, the sound of shooting, and reported that air defenses had brought down some objects, but it had no further details. So, again, provoke, provoke, provoke. Okay, Eurovision got going this last weekend. And it actually turned out to be a big hit for Palestine. Now, the organizers of the Eurovision Song Contest, which was not held in Europe this year, they're saying it's a non-political event, but the issue of Palestine took center stage. And that may make Israel come to regret its weaponization of culture and the attempted whitewashing of its discrimination against the Palestinian people. Now, Eurovision reached a global audience in the millions. That's an audience the pro-Palestine lobby could only dream of. And it gave the Palestinian cause a platform and exposure to people not normally thinking about Middle East politics. Madonna was the headline act, and on the back of one of her dancers was the Palestinian flag. The Icelandic band Hatari displayed Palestinian banners on live television. And now the organizers of Eurovision are saying, well, they should be punished. Iceland should be punished. How dare they do that? So anyway, security confiscated the flags, and apparently the Icelanders will be punished by the European Broadcasting Union, which is not tolerant of those who violate its rules. So we'll see what happens with that. Governor Ron DeSantis has announced that he plans to sign a bill to combat anti-Semitism while on a trip to Israel this month. Apparently, DeSantis thought it was a really cool idea. He's taking his entire cabinet with them. They're going to have a cabinet meeting in Israel, and he's going to sign this anti-Semitism bill, which is a bill that criminalizes the BDS movement and is trying to equate criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism in order to punish those who criticize Israel, a clear violation of the First Amendment right to freedom of thought, speech, and expression. And it's alarming, I think, at this point. Pardon me. It's alarming how many of our politicians are willing to just trash what this country is supposed to stand for to please their Israeli masters. And by the way, have you noticed that none of these people have registered as a foreign agent for Israel? They're out there lobbying for Israel all the time. They're out there doing favors for Israel all the time. Vast majority of people in Congress are doing favors for Israel all the time. They should be required to register as foreign agents under the Foreign Agent Registration Act, but it hasn't happened. Just think about that one for a while. It's like AIPAC, which has not registered as a foreign agent, even though very clearly it is acting in Israel's interests. Over in France, they're threatening 3 French journalists with jail time for revealing the country's involvement in the Yemen civil war. It was supposed to be a big hush-hush over there. In a series of reports published in April, investigative journalists from Disclose and Radio France revealed the number of French arms sold to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. So hostilities building against the war in Yemen. Over in Italy, the Italian unions have refused to load cargo onto a Saudi ship carrying weapons in a protest against Riyadh's war on Yemen. The dockwalkers have gone on strike, refusing to work until the ship leaves port in Genoa. So good for them. Good for those Italians. Over in Turkey, Erdogan is out there trying to explain to the United States of America the S-400 system is a done deal. And they're already looking at the S-500. And the United States has a choice. They can either deliver the F-35s or they cannot. And if they don't, Turkey will probably turn to Russia for warplanes. And given the performance of the F-35 so far, that might not be such a bad idea. Over in Ukraine, things are happening fast there. The ruling coalition has broken up, and it broke up on Friday after the People's Front Party quit outgoing President Poroshenko's faction, potentially paving the way for incoming President Volodymyr Zelensky to call for a snap election, which he has already done. He's come on up and said there are going to be snap elections for a new parliament, and he is basically saying he wants to end the country's 5-year conflict with Russia. That is not going to sit well with NATO. It's not going to sit very well with the United States of America. And with Ukraine going back to being pro-Russia, and Russia obviously being pro-Russia, those breakaway Ukrainian republics might just tone down and say, hey, let's go back to being one country. Because we've got a government in Kiev that represents us. Now, there's this article over at Blacklisted News, and it's talking about how the United States just continues to pound on Venezuela. And as you know, last week, citing security concerns, the United States banned all air transport with Venezuela, further isolating the troubled country. Now, this is just the latest volley in a siege, which is exactly what it is. The United States government has been trying for ages to topple the regime of President Nicolas Maduro, after trying to do the same to his predecessor, Hugo Chavez. So the new play, of course, is the Trump White House recognizing Juan Guaido as president and starving and sanctioning the country. Maduro, of course, continues to resist. Now, the American corporate media, of course, is in lockstep here. Every article is seen from one angle. Venezuelans are under the heel of a dictator who caused the economic crisis, and the only hope is a humanitarian intervention by the United States. We've heard this all before. So, Venezuela's ambassador to Britain, Rocio Minero, warned today that Washington's bid to destroy Venezuela is wrecking the international laws governing relations between all states. He's certainly correct about that. The United States is ignoring international law. So is Israel, for that matter. So, no, he went on to say, nobody really understands the danger of the precedent set by the decision by some countries to recognize would-be usurper Juan Guaido as Venezuela's leader in contravention of all international norms. And of course, what he's talking about is the fact Venezuela had elections last year. Maduro won. Guaido didn't even run. So Ms. Minero said her country is under siege. That word is going to start coming up more and more, saying that this blockade designed to break the nation had already cost billions of dollars and thousands of lives, and if the nation resists, the U.S. military stands ready to act. Ms. Minero detailed the net cast by the U.S. to trap Venezuela, including the oil sanctions that have cost the country an estimated $6 billion in revenues since August 2017. There are even harsher measures on state oil firm PDVSA and its U.S. subsidiary Citgo that have cost $11 billion in expected revenue. It is. Venezuela has been laid siege to. It's a classic pattern here. All right, we're coming up here on a commercial break, and when we come on back, we're going to be talking about wars and rumors of wars in other parts of the country. So stay tuned. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And once again, our extreme heartfelt gratitude to those of you who have been donating and keeping Republic Broadcasting and WhatReallyHappened.com alive. And again, thank you all very much for your support. So the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other times. So the network thanks you, I thank you, and with your help, we're going to pull through. We're going to make this. Okay, so article coming on out of Russia Insider saying the U.S. is heading toward a looming maritime showdown, but not with Iran. And it's basically talking about how the media's attention has been at the Strait of Hormuz and Iran's threat to close it if it's attacked. The USS Abraham Lincoln sailing on through with a bunch of other warships, and just everybody making stink face at each other. And being de-emphasized, being ignored in fact, is that we're looking at a similar looming maritime showdown in the South China Sea. And every once in a while we hear about the U.S. doing a freedom of navigation exercise and China complaining. But it is as potentially serious and potentially dangerous as what's going on over in the Strait of Hormuz. China has invested a lot in building up those islands. And those islands, according to the Cairo Convention, do belong to China. So it's just all these countries out there saying, no, I've decided we want them. And, okay. Meanwhile, Lawrence Wilkerson, former Army Colonel Lawrence Wilkin, who was Chief of Staff for Secretary of State Colin Powell during the W administration, he's saying the United States government is driving down a highway to war with China, for which there is no sound justification. Now, I know what the justifications are, so do you. It's to smash an economic rival. Same justification that got us into World War I against Germany and World War II against Germany. Smash an economic power that we could not compete with. China is not a threat to the people of America. And by the way, if we go to war with China, there's not going to be any ground invasion. That war is going to be fought with the missiles, and I would like to remind everybody that China is also a nuclear power. Our Midwest is still reeling from the massive flooding from the spring melt, and that's going to cause some problems down the way. In contrast, North Korea has been suffering a record drought. And apparently South Korea has decided they need to start sending food aid to the North quickly. And apparently they're going to provide $8 million worth of medical and nutritional aid for North Korean children through United Nations agencies, while it considers sending broader food aid into the country, which I think is a very smart thing for them to do if Moon Jae-in is serious about reunification. When you help your enemy when they're down, that goes a long way to rebuilding friendships. So North Korea's state media said last week the drought they're suffering is the worst in a century. There's no messing around with Mother Nature here. Down in Australia, Prime Minister Scott Morrison's Liberal National Coalition government will return to power. They're calling it a shock result, because pollsters and experts agreed the election was unwinnable for Conservatives and unlosable for the country's Labour Party. Well, just like in 2016, the pollsters got it wrong, or there was massive election fraud, maybe one or the other. Okay, let's take a phone call here. Tony in Puerto Rico, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I have a quick comment. Who do you think the people of the United States should be more afraid of in terms of their right to privacy? The FBI or the CIA, or both?
Both, plus add in there to that the NSA and all these corporate marketing and advertising companies.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Okay, as you know, the Navy is going gender balanced, and it has created some predictable problems. 2 years ago, the USS Florida became the second Navy submarine to have a partially female crew. And unfortunately, a rape list was quickly circulated among the male crew, and basically ranking them. And the boat's commander has been sacked following a probe. Okay, we got to take another break for commercials here, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And we've got a caller on the line, HB in Tennessee. Aloha, HB. How's the weather out there?
Aloha, Michael. Weather today is just beautiful. It's a little on the warm side, probably about 90.
Okay.
But
you're warmer than we are.
Pretty normal May. Is that right?
Well,
what I want to call about is talk about the weather.
Yes.
You can't. I'm here in East Tennessee. We seem to get a lot more spraying and drift overs and total gray out days than other places in the region. My wife travels back to Atlanta a lot. We have friends in Florida. Oh no, it's clear here. It's sunny here. But I mean, I keep a log of the weather. I have for the last few years, and we've had one day of no spray and no flyover this year, and that's all.
Well, you know, weather is weather.
It's ridiculous.
Climate's what you expect, and weather's what you get.
But I mean, I know you've studied geoengineering, and I wanted to make two points that people have said. George Soros is known to want to control the food supply of the world, in America especially. And LBJ said back in a speech, he was at a college or somewhere, he had a cap and gown on.
Yes.
And he's saying, LBJ used to talk, we want to control, he who controls the weather controls the people, or something like that.
Yeah, well, there's been a lot of talk about weather control as a weapon for a very, very long time. Nobody's ever really been able to get it to work.
You don't think?
Nope. I mean, if you look, first of all, if you look at the amount of energy required, and you look at the vast, the sheer volume of the atmosphere and ground surface, it's just not really practical at this point. I mean, there have been some experiments with cloud seeding to generate rain. There have even been lawsuits as a result of that from the people who were downstream, who were expecting the rain and didn't get it. But as far as engineering the weather, I mean, if they could really do that, do you think we would have tornadoes tearing up the Great Plains today?
That's just it, Michael. They've admitted since the 40s, since about 45, that they can control hurricanes. They can steer them.
Then why do they keep slamming into such economically sensitive parts of our country? I'm sorry, I don't care for anybody who calls and says, well, they say, and they've admitted, and the real world isn't matching up with that. If they could steer the hurricanes, they would steer them away from, places like Florida, which gets more than its fair share of hurricanes, Texas, Louisiana, that whole area. Okay? If they could really steer the hurricanes.
Sandy.
Okay?
Hurricane Sandy. A week before Hurricane Sandy did what it did, they were predicting that. It was going to go up the coast, it's going to get up right here, and it's going to take a 90-degree cut back in. And that's what it did. How did they know that a week ahead, Michael?
Because that's what meteorology is all about. And, we have people who track hurricanes out. HB, will you stop cutting me off?
Okay. I got a lot to say, man.
Well, we're going to bring this call to a close here real soon. The point here is that what you're claiming doesn't match up with what we see in the real world. And yes, they're able to predict where the hurricanes are going. They spend a lot of money and resources tracking those things because of the potential destruction coming from them. We have people who track the storms out here in the Pacific. In fact, our official hurricane season begins on June 1st. And they'll be tracking those things. And, we've had a couple of near misses this last year. And hopefully, we'll get out of here over to Indiana before, we have any more. Anyway, listen, HB, we're going to let you go and switch over to Dave from Delaware. Aloha, Dave. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how's it going, Mike?
Going okay.
How you doing today?
Doing fine.
Oh, that's good. You were real quick to shut that last caller down about geoengineering, weren't you, Mike?
Well, we've dealt with that kind of stuff many times over the years.
No, you haven't. You always say that, oh, it's a kooky conspiracy theory. And,
no, I've never said that. I've never said that.
You always say it's
Dave, did I not sit and explain why this idea of weather control is impractical? Did I not talk about the amount of energy required, the volume of the atmosphere, and the the huge surface of the Earth?
No, you didn't. No, you didn't. You didn't examine it at all. You tried to shut down the whole conversation.
Dave, you obviously did not listen to that last call. Now, you told our call screener that you wanted to talk about Venezuela. Do you want to talk about Venezuela?
Do you think they have geoengineering projects going on in Venezuela like they do in Iran? You know, the
Kook Squad is out here today. All right. Now, getting on back to the real world and turning to our domestic politics here. Trey Gowdy, even though he is no longer a representative, he's still in the news, and he's still out there making a lot of noise about what's been going on with that whole Russiagate situation. And let's see. So he was apparently on Fox News, and he was dropping hints that the FBI withheld important information from the FISA court that he says would have been a game changer. Said there was information the FBI withheld that would have in all probability caused the FISA court to say no on these warrants. So he's out there saying that there needs to be an examination of what's going on. Now, Trey Gowdy also claimed that the FBI, in its effort to corroborate the Steele dossier, basically relied on information from a Clinton ally, Sidney Blumenthal. Okay. Have to put a message here. So anyway, Gowdy's out there saying that, yeah, the FBI basically relied on Sidney Blumenthal for the claims made in the Steele dossier, which was funded, at least in part, by the Hillary Clinton campaign. It's a rather incestuous little circle there. Now, Obama's former Attorney General, Eric Holder, is out there attacking Bill Barr for launching an investigation into Spygate and saying he shouldn't do that. He's not fit to lead the Department of Justice. So they're afraid. They're obviously afraid there's something out there to find. I think they did what they did back in 2016 in the sure and certain belief that Hillary Clinton was going to win and there would never be any investigations into what they did. And that may explain the panic when Trump won and the effort over the last 2 years to find some way to destroy him, to get him out of there and get somebody in there who'd be more amenable to just letting it all go away. But so far as we can tell, the investigator appointed by Barr is really serious about looking into some of this stuff. Another little story here. Apparently, the British intelligence chiefs were briefed on the Steele dossier before Trump even knew of its existence. And Larry Johnson, who's a former CIA analyst, basically accused the United Kingdom of helping the Obama administration spy on the 2016 Trump presidential campaign. Now, do you remember after Trump won and all the liberals were just going wacko and crazy, and it gave rise to the term Trump derangement syndrome? Well, there's a study from Sage Journals indicating that they were basically lying about their mental distress to try and make Trump look bad, and that when the cameras were not on them, their actions did not indicate any symptoms of mental distress. It was just out. It was a big act. It was a big, oh, look what Trump is doing to the country. All of us Democrats were having our meltdowns here. Now, during a recent episode of The Five on Fox News, co-host Dagan McDowell went off on a rant about the Russia conspiracy and the sleazy players at the deep state. So, basically, Dagan McDowell was asking, are Obama-era intelligence officials worried about what Attorney General Barr's investigation into the origins of the Russia probe will find? Now, Fox Business, Dagan McDowell believes they are, and that's why Democrats are questioning Barr's motives. Oh, he's got to have, evil motives. And they're trying to discredit him because they are worried. So at one point, Juan Williams, the liberal on the panel, suggested that we already know the truth because of the press. And at that point, McDowell exploded and just unloaded on him. So people aren't going along with the, people just aren't going on with the lies anymore. I think the corporate media is in serious, serious trouble. In that earlier story, we were talking about some kind of a plan to rebuild trust in the American media by having the American corporate media appear to be anti-war. It's not going to happen overnight, especially after this over 2-year lie about the Trump-Russia collusion. The American people aren't just going to turn around and say, oh, the media is now against war, I'm going to trust everything that they say. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the economic news. The U.S. ultimatum on Huawei appears to be backfiring. Now, the U.S. has been putting pressure on its many partners across the world to follow its lead and ban Huawei from their national telecommunications network. And the Trump administration is out there repeating Bush saying, you're either with us or against us. But unlike back then, few countries are going along with the U.S. pressure because they understand the huge difference between joining an anti-terror coalition and an anti-Chinese trading one, which is really what this is about. All this stories about potential Chinese spying, like the United States doesn't do a lot of that. And building off that observation, Huawei's services are inexpensive and high quality, the exact opposite of what the competition is providing, whether American or otherwise. And that's why these countries are going to purchase Huawei technology to help them modernize their telecommunications infrastructure in preparation for the global 5G revolution. And by the way, I've noticed the anti-5G propaganda is still all over the place. Oh, we've got 100 doctors who've lined up to say that if you stand next to a 5G cell, your hair will fall out, your nose will fall off, your ears will curl inward, and all kinds of other things. It's a scare tactic. America's telecom companies don't want to spend the money to upgrade. They want to keep everybody on the 4G. They want 5G not to get in here because they can't compete. And so it's turning into a very visible manifestation of the trade war. Google has yanked Huawei's Android license. Huawei was licensing Google's version of Android. Now they're going to have to use an open source version. And nobody's really sure what's going to happen moving forward. It's not going to be good for Google because Huawei is one of the biggest phone makers in the world. And the license fee to Google, I presume, is on a per unit base. Now, Huawei apparently saw this as potentially coming, and they have developed their own proprietary operating system for their smartphones. And apparently that is ready to go. Apparently this was revealed just last month. A years-long project to build an alternative to the Android operating system. So, meanwhile, Intel, Qualcomm, and other chip makers are reportedly joining Google in the Huawei ban. Now, Huawei has been stockpiling chips to prepare for this eventuality. This is an open trade war, and open trade wars can turn into real wars. Speaking at China's Second Belt and Road Conference in Beijing with 37 heads of state, Russian President Putin unveiled the intention to unite Russia's Northern Sea route with China's Maritime Silk Road. And this will create a single Arctic Sea lane for trade, which will cut Asia to Europe shipping routes by 5,000 miles. So, good for them. Good for them. Until global warming freezes the Arctic over again, but then they'll have the One Belt, One Road up and running by that point. Bernie Sanders came out with an interesting observation. He was saying, if we can pay baseball players hundreds of millions of dollars, teachers deserve a raise. Now, it's rather a weak linkage, but I'm in agreement with Sanders. Teachers deserve a raise. In fact, every lower class, working class, middle class American deserves a raise. We can't survive the way the economy is right now. And I know it does rankle a lot of people, the wealth inequality in this country, with movie stars, music stars, and athletes just making huge, huge amounts of money, along with corporate CEOs. Now, out in California, they're having a crisis with housing affordability. It's getting worse. Up in San Francisco, it's at a 10-year low, and only 1 in 5 households can afford to purchase a median-priced single-family home in the Bay Area. And the crisis has driven many people literally onto the water, living on makeshift boats outside marinas and wealthy communities. So there is a floating homeless population. And apparently over in Marin County, it's doubled in the last 5 years to well over 100. The community of 200 barges, sailboats, and other vessels comprised of people who are employed, but they just can't afford to live on land. Boat life for them isn't easy. It does take a lot of work to keep the boats maintained. And they talked to this one lady, Christina Weber, moved onto a 54-foot vessel she purchased for $15,000. She got a bargain because she couldn't afford to rent in Sausalito. We actually have a lot of that here in Hawaii. If you go down to some of our marinas, you will see a lot of boats, and first thing you think, oh, look at all these wonderful boats. And then you see all the indications. These are people's primary residences. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go to the phones to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, with Tucker Carlson did all that. He's doing the homeless problem, and yeah, that's a result from all this bubble, the housing bubble.
Yes.
And it keeps inflating. That you're just going to keep having people like that can't afford to pay their rent, and it's just going to keep getting worse and worse and worse until like this bubble pops. I mean, that's it. Because it's bad on the East Coast and the West Coast with homeless tents. And a lot of shelters are filled up. Some people don't want to stay in the shelters, but it's, this is a sign of the times, man.
Well, the thing is that this flood of illegal immigrants coming into this country is adding to the problem because they need housing. And so you have more and more people competing for fewer, for less and less housing. And of course, it's going to drive the prices up.
And most likely it's even also happening in Europe with all the refugees and the housing and all the bubbles. It's a worldwide.
I imagine it would be.
Prices. Mike, on Trump's tariffs, Qualcomm, 70% of their chip sales go to China.
Yes.
If people realize that, this has nothing to do with back doors into spying on anything, because Angela Merkel's phone was tapped by the NSA. So
yes,
this is all about Huawei, 5G, and by the way, 5G is less power it takes than 4G because that's why they got to put more of the towers closer together.
Yes.
So it's more, it's better bandwidth, and it's actually not as much better bandwidth, Mike, but it's actually a lot. It's lower latency. That's what's real important.
Yes.
The lower latency. But this is all scare tactics because it's about economics.
Yes.
You know, I mean, the same with Iran. That's part of the Belt and Road also, isn't it? Because that's.
I think so. Yeah.
So, like, yeah. I mean, I think Washington D.C. knows that Chinese are eating our lunch, basically.
Yes.
At this point, and I just don't see these tariffs working because, you know, the farmers are getting crushed. Trump's
Yes.
going to have to give them another $15 billion in basically a subsidy. Like, where's that money going to come from? The $15 billion. In addition, he already gave them $5 billion. And doesn't. And what does that mean, Mike? Like, they're still not going to buy our soybeans. Like, they're going to, they're going to get from Russia is going to do, or Brazil, or China's going to be doing it indigenously. So, giving money to farmers, it's not fixing the problem in the long run, right? I mean,
no, it really isn't. It really isn't. And I don't know what Trump is going to do. Just have the farmers sit there, or have them grow what crops they can for the American marketplace, or just start handing it out. Remember Reagan and his cheese when they had the cheese surplus?
Yeah, I just don't see this. It's a loss, this trade. And, Mike, I just want to let you know, if you're not going to hold me over, about Ford is going to lay off 7,000.
Yeah, I was going to mention that here in a little bit. Okay, we got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're going to go to David in California. Aloha, David. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Seems to me if you really wanted to put the kibosh on this whole geoengineering thing, bring Dane Wigington on your show, rip him a new one, and then put the thing to bed.
Look, you told our call screener that you wanted to talk about Venezuela.
Yeah. You know, like if I would have...
Okay. Yeah, they're trying to kookify the radio show. There must be something getting ready to happen where they're trying to discredit the independent media as quickly as they can. All right, getting on back to the economic news, getting on back to the sane world. Over in San Francisco, again, their homeless population has increased by 17%. This in a so-called liberal utopia. All right. Now, the entire U.S. agricultural sector is looking at a 1980s style farm downturn, record debt levels. Demand for new tractors is set to collapse as farmers hang on to old Deere and Company equipment. So John Deere has been forced to slash production. And again, looking at the heavy flooding in the last several months, the deepening trade war with China, depressed commodity prices, skyrocketing fuel costs, declining land values, and massive debt loads have squeezed farmers so much that Deere slashed production to deal with the downturn. They know that people are just not going to be able to buy the newer equipment. And again, at least when I was a kid living on that farm, that John Deere was considered the absolute best. Was very rugged, very dependable, very easy to repair. Okay, so as Dustin was mentioning, Ford has announced they're cutting 7,000 white-collar jobs. That's about 10% of its salaried staff worldwide, which it says will save the company about $600 million a year. And apparently workers will be notified of the cuts starting tomorrow, and the terminations will be completed by the end of August. About 2,400 of the job cuts are in North America. 1,500 of those positions are going to be eliminated through a voluntary buyout offer. So tell us again how wonderful the economy is doing. And by the way, talking about limits to production and everything, again, overflow lots for car dealerships everywhere. They can't move them. I mean, if the American people actually had incomes right now, it would be a great time to buy a new car. Apparently, U.S. store closures are racing toward an estimated total of 7,000 stores this year. right now 7 million Americans are behind on their car loan payments. That's how bad that is. Okay, let's take a phone call. Robert in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. You just brought up the Sausalito anchorage, didn't you?
Well, I know about the Sausalito anchorage, but those are deliberately built houseboats for people to live on. And it's not like they were...
Actually, I'm right out here. I live in that anchorage. So maybe you and I could really talk closely about what that really means.
Okay, well, were you forced to live in the anchorage because you couldn't afford living on the land?
No, in fact, most of the people out here have not been forced to live in this anchorage because of inadequacies of being able to afford to live on the land. Believe it or not, this anchorage has listed itself as a staple product of this county since like the early 1970s. And
yes.
I don't think it's fair for you or Tucker Carlson to bring us into the homeless problem out here. This is not...
Wait a minute. Back up here. I said San Francisco, not Sausalito. We're comparing apples and oranges here.
Specifically about anchored outboats in Marin County. That was exactly what you said. Am I incorrect?
That's what the article said, yes.
Yeah, that was exactly what you said.
Okay, so it worked out well for you, but again...
I'm here in Marin County right now. I'm actually out here on my boat right now.
Okay.
My boat is designed to be able to be lived aboard. I have a shower, I have a stove, I have a refrigerator, I have a couch, I have a bed, I have holding tanks for my waste. I dump them appropriately on a very defined schedule, and most of the people that live out here in this anchorage do exactly the same thing that I do. And I will grant you that we have a few people out here who happen to be addicted to drugs or whatever their problem is, that happen to bring our entire community's reputation down as a whole, but they do not represent what our community is. And I want that really, really well understood by anybody that might be listening to this broadcast, because we here in Marin County who happen to live out here on the water are not derelict bums.
Well, apparently the ones that are down there in San Francisco Harbor are, because in that case, many of those barges they're on are basically cobbled.
There is no harbor in San Francisco, Mike.
What?
There is no harbor in San Francisco.
There's a shoreline.
Legal anchorage, the only legal anchorage in the entire Bay Area for long-term residents is in Marin County. Right here in Sausalito, right here in Richardson Bay.
Okay, well, again, I don't care if it's legal or not. According to the article, that there are people who are just finding places where they can tie up along the shoreline, either in an old boat or in a barge or whatever they've cobbled together. And that's what the original article said. And I'm sorry if I've hurt your feelings.
Michael, is that what I'm trying to tell you, Michael, is that the headlines are wrong. I live out here. I see what happens out here on a daily basis, and everything they're reporting is wrong. You and Tucker Carlson there on Fox News happen to have actually cost me 2 jobs. There were 2 work contracts that I had coming up, and somebody decided that they were not going to hire me to do their fiberglass work because they had heard on Fox News that all of us anchor outs were nothing more than homeless bums. So thank you, Mike. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm sorry that you suffered economically from the news here, but you do reveal that you do have a financial bias in this story. So thank you very much. We're going to let you go and switch over to Dan in Illinois. Aloha, Dan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I just recently took a trip to and from Illinois down to Florida, and I came back. And the entire length through Tennessee and Kentucky, and I drove the entire length of Illinois. Unplanted cornfields, untouched cornfields.
Are they still flooded out?
Well, you could see tractor tracks out in them, and you could see they didn't want to go too far out into the fields.
Yeah, the ground is still too soaked with water.
And they're just starting to get to them. I'm in between Rockford and Chicago, let's say. They're just starting to go out in the fields here because it was so bad. And there's still standing water all over the place up here. And I came in through Paducah, and I drove the entire length of Illinois. And that's all I seen was untouched fields, grown over with weeds and stuff.
Oh, man.
That's the Corn Belt.
Yeah, and nobody's really talking about this. Yeah, there are going to be serious food shortages in the very, very near future in this country. And I know that's not something the American people are used to thinking about. But yeah, between the detoxification of the Gulf of Mexico, the flooding, the delay in the planting season, the tariff war with China, and all those, what was it, 22 million illegal immigrant mouths that are gobbling up food as well?
Well, when I was down in Florida, they were going to dump a couple hundred thousand in Palm Beach County and Broward County. And nobody knows who told them to do it.
Well, that may have turned out to be a piece of fake news. The Trump White House is saying it was never under serious consideration, and it appears that it came from a story from, the corporate media just trying to fan up this whole immigration debate, and we have to feel sorry for them, and Donald Trump is bad. Donald Trump is bad.
Yeah, it made the news down there. They said, "Hey, we're Florida. We got nothing. We got no border with Mexico or none of these countries, like where these the states where these people are coming in. We don't want them here." And the people down there, Ron DeSantis said he was going to check into it. Oh,
I guess when he gets back from his cabinet meeting in Israel.
Yeah. Well, first things first, right?
Right. Absolutely.
I just wanted to talk about the Illinois River is way, way, way over its banks yet. I mean, it's flooded big time. So I thought I'd let you know. That's what I seen. This is just yesterday. I went down on Tuesday and I came back yesterday. So.
All right. Well, thank you for that update here, because again, corporate media is not covering that devastation from all that flooding to the farmlands. Anyway, Dan, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And we're talking about the economic news here. Article coming on out of Goldcore saying gold suppression, it's not a question of if, but to what extent. And the article is basically out there saying gold price suppression is not a conspiracy theory. It's well-documented phenomenon. It's happening all over the place. Back in 2014, Barclays was fined nearly $44 million for failing to prevent traders from manipulating the London gold fix. Late last year, a former JP Morgan trader pleaded guilty to manipulating the U.S. metals markets. And some experts are saying that it's still being held down today. And that if it were let go, that you would see gold go up to 4,000, maybe 5,000 an ounce. Jim Willie is out there saying the Chinese would love to see gold hit $10,000 an ounce because they've got so much of it. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Sherry in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I think you take the punches very well, Mike.
Yep.
I'm starting to feel them myself. Tuesday, May 16, 2019, there's the gremlins out there, seem to be our own people, wanting to shut you down. So, of course, we have to be careful. The security forces believe, you said, at 3:12 my time, Central Time U.S., and you were off the air for a good while, and you came back later. Also, that same day, a caller regarding Monsanto, he said, Monsanto report, and then it went off the air, and he was talking about, he was talking about capitalism and how we wish we had the old ways back, the old times back, where capitalism was really something wonderful. But that was at 5:40, and he later mentioned on a subsequent show what he had to say. But he ended with, our country is going broke. He didn't know why he was cut off. It was the gremlins editing us out. I don't think people realize how see, Trump said in 17 months new laws are regarding illegals are going into effect. Now that I believe, that I can count on. I can take it to the bank or whatever, because we're getting it from someone who does speak the truth. At least I think he's about the only one we can trust now. But I do want to say this, if I may. Go to Duck, for all those who want to have questions about things we can't talk about on this show because it's just too huge an issue, and we don't want the gremlins to come back and cut us off. Go to DuckDuckGo or Yandex and ask China to tell them about the Olympics. There was an article in the paper when they had the Olympics. I think it was in anywhere from the mid 1990s to the early 2000s. They hosted an Olympic.
Yes.
And they wrote an article in a magazine that was sent to me, and it was very interesting. I thought I should save it, but I threw it away just because I was afraid I might mention it and get in trouble. I mean, it's such a hot issue, and we've had some people asking you questions here, and it's things you can't answer unless you want the gremlins to come back. There's a reason. The reason that some of these things are such a big deal, and people are right in what they think, and I think the bubble will burst eventually, but don't bring it up here. Ask China about their Olympics and what they had to say in an article to America and what they didn't want us doing, and they will talk about these sensitive things you were bringing up a little while ago. There's more pressing issues. I've had my one call for the day, so I'll talk about the hospital another time. But
Sherry, can we back up here a little bit? How do you listen to RBN? Are you going directly to the Republic Broadcasting website? Are you watching on YouTube?
I am probably the only one in America not online and don't have a cell phone or anything. I just have a C-Crane radio. That it's really one of the older ones. It used to have TV on it. It's the only one that's kept going. The other ones, I'd pull up the antenna, it would come right off. The others all fell apart. I have an old Magnavox that sometimes I can get you on.
Okay, so you're listening to us over the air.
Radio.
You're listening to us on the air broadcaster.
Yeah, just on the air, and like a lot of people, I pay my bills, but I've got some life left in me, and I've got to make it last. So, and things are getting awfully expensive, so I have to budget. So
yes, everybody does these days.
And I get all my TV through an antenna. I'm on the side of a hill. I'm eye level with the hills between me and Fredericksburg, so I can point it up into the sky, and I can get TV without having to pay for it. God, I hope that doesn't go away. But I'm all equipped with CDs and that my kids send me, and tapes from thrifts and the CDs there. I have plenty of entertainment.
Okay.
And I taped your show too for years. I taped it before my Magnavox gave out.
All right.
So I have. But that's it.
All right. Well, Sherry, we got to let you go here. We got callers on the line. Let's switch over to Rick in Arizona. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I don't know, the border and employment, anywhere you go, you can find there's all sorts of job openings, but they don't pay anything, and you can't really, it's hard to move. I mean, if you're living somewhere, you either got a lease that you got to break, or, it's just a big nut to crack. So I guess the easiest way is just to bring in some people across the border and ship them up there. But I was just wondering, is there any video of all these tens of thousands of people coming across the border? That's one thing I don't see. I hear about the tens of thousands.
Well, there are videos of them coming across here. You can go to YouTube and do a search, although I'm sure they're going to, de-emphasize them. But again, it's something that the government doesn't want ordinary Americans knowing about. And right now, it's only a small percentage of the American people understand how serious the crisis has become. And politicians are campaigning on it, and they're out there saying, "Oh, we've got lots of room, and we can let all these people in." Most Americans don't realize 22 million illegal immigrants who are in here competing for jobs with Americans, competing for food with Americans, competing for living accommodations with Americans, and even though they're not supposed to be voting, they're voting themselves our country by voting Democratic.
Yeah. That land down there by McAllen where they're always talking about the border, that ground down there gets 4 corn crops a year.
Well, not this year.
Climate, you can plant it. You get, I don't know. But I mean, I've seen some late springs, and I don't know. I'm not going to worry about food prices going up just yet. I think it's already too. I mean, beef is about $1 to $10 a pound for. That's cheap for prime or for top sirloin. But what does the farmer sell his cow to the packing house for? $1 a pound at the most.
Well,
thanks for taking my call.
All right, you got it. And it's been so long since I've been involved in farming life. And of course I was a kid back then, so I wasn't paying attention to the economics. Okay, we got to take another break for commercials. We'll be back with another caller after these few words. Aloha America, welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones to Sebastian in Sweden. Aloha Sebastian, thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind today?
Mike, I just want to talk about the elections coming up now
yes.
on Sunday here in Sweden. I think most of the countries in Europe are going to have it this weekend. It seems like the Social Democrats have gone backwards a while in the latest polls, and the Swedish Democrats are up almost neck and neck with them. But I'm sort of leaning on the fence of voting for the old breakaway from the Swedish Democrats. They're called the Alternative for Sweden.
Yes.
I'm afraid they won't get that 4%. So I don't know what I'm going to do. Maybe at the last minute. But I like they're young and they got lots of fire. They go on they speak in on these open air places. Like last weekend, a few days ago, it was in Malmö. And that's a lot of immigrants there. And AFS or what is it called? Antifa was there, screaming him out, but he still spoke, and he really spoke well over the crowd and everything. The guy is really nice. He's pretty fiery, but I don't know what to do. I'm sort of up in the air now. The thing of it is, it's just Swedish Democrats have voted 74% of all the bills that were taken up in the EU. They're already in the EU, the Parliament now. And Christian Democrats, who I like as well, they voted 92% on all the bills. But, we don't know what the bills are. So maybe they were good. I'm not sure, Some things are good for, maybe some things are good in the common market, when they had, like poison in foods and stuff like that, So, I don't know. It's sort of a toss-up now.
Well, I know that right now the European Union is under a huge amount of strain. And part of it is the migration, part of it is the economic, and the other part of it, of course, is that the EU was sold to the people of Europe as merely a free trade, open border confederation, if you will. And the EU has now grown to be this very powerful central government. And now they're finding out that was really the goal all along. To have this federalized European state. And a lot of the people of Europe are really kind of fed up with all of that. So we'll see what's going to happen in the elections, and I hope the elections can be kept honest and fair and open and verifiable. But the people pushing for globalism, they won't hesitate to cheat. That they believe they serve a higher purpose.
I was in Stockholm this last weekend, my granddaughter's birthday, and I noticed when I was taking the train up on the outskirts of Stockholm, you could see like shanty towns built, almost like in Brazil. And my ex-wife said that they were these beggars, from I think Bulgaria or in the Eastern Europe, or they're in the EU now, but they come up and they're outside every store. I mean, it's in every little town and every store they're outside begging for money, and there's no law against it. Only a few places in Sweden, counties, that have a law against it, and they're the ones who are ruled by the Swedish Democrats. But all counties not yet. But okay, well, thank you for the time, Mike.
All right, well, thank you very much for the phone call. And, you know, I've never been to Stockholm, but I've seen a lot of pictures of it, and the idea that it's now filled with shanty towns, and we're seeing that all across Europe because of this open borders policy. And it just seems like the entire world is in decay right now. All right, getting on back to the economic news, Canada has dumped the most treasuries in 8 years. China has resumed selling off their treasuries, and that's going to put, again, a strain on our economy. And the question is, who's buying these treasuries? Knowing that there's a treasury bond bubble, that they all can't be redeemed, and it's almost like they're starting to treat them as if they are currency. You know, we're just going to pass them around and sell them back and forth with no intention of their ever actually being redeemed, which would be a good thing for the American taxpayers who is expected to redeem them. Turning on down to the border, there was this Border Patrol agent, Hector Garza. He's basically vice president of the National Border Patrol Council. And he told Harris Faulkner on Fox News Channel, "We've lost control of the border as we are right now." And he continued saying, "We must come up with a new plan to correct the problems that led to the loss of the control of the border." Well, two ideas just off the top of my head. Build that fence from the Rio Grande all the way out to San Diego, one strip. Don't talk about prioritizing. We're going to build a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit there, because the people, smugglers, are just going to drive that much further. They're going to drive to the open places. And the other is start enforcing Title VIII and prosecuting employers who hire illegal immigrants, prosecuting anybody who is giving them aid and comfort. Those are all violations of Title VIII. If we shut off the flow of free stuff to the illegal immigrants, they're not going to come here any longer. They come up here expecting it's going to be the land of milk and honey, and right now for them, it is. Anyway, we got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go to the phones to Kerry in California. Aloha, Kerry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, you just mentioned that people know in our southern borders, beyond our southern borders, what they're going to get here. You know, all the benefits they're going to get. And they know that around the world. And I talk to Americans, and a lot of them don't have a clue what they get. You know, maybe if you have a handle on it, you can just give us a little brief.
Well, like I said, there was that Yale MIT study which has estimated that there is somewhere between 16 and 29 million illegal immigrants already inside this country. And as that Border Patrol agent said, they've lost control of the border. They're just pouring on in. And they don't have enough facilities to sort of house them while their applications for asylum are processed. And so a lot of them are just being let go. And it's changing the demographics of this country. And the real danger to the American people is that these illegal immigrants are being encouraged to vote, even though legally they're not supposed to. We know that there were millions of illegal immigrants who voted in the 2016 election for Hillary. And if this keeps up this way, they're going to form a vote medical care. They're getting housing vouchers. I mean, Trump did just end Section 8 housing for them. Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. Free education. There are colleges that now have special scholarship programs for illegal immigrant students at a time when legal students are having to go hideously into debt to get a college education. There's just all these kind of handouts. It varies from state to state, but usually in these liberal democratic states, they're out there saying, oh, these poor illegal immigrants, let's give them all kinds of stuff and remind them to vote Democratic. And it's just a very, you know, overt way of literally buying the votes of these illegal immigrants.
Yeah, my daughter's got over $100,000 worth of student loans, and she can't get any help with them. And if I would have known all this in the beginning, I would have told her just learn Spanish and pretend like you don't speak English, and come over and get all these things, you know.
Yes.
And then when the thing came up about the Dreamers, I'm thinking, You know, how do they get into college? How do they get into grade school? How do they get into high school? When I went to school, my mother had to take my birth certificate down there in the beginning.
Yes.
You know, you couldn't go to school unless you had that, you know? And what the federal government ought to do, but, you know, they're all behind it. The states are behind it. The federal government's behind it. And there's a lot of special interests that are behind it. So it's kind of like fighting against the flow. But, you know, if they really want to stop it, all they have to do is go in and find the states that are doing this. You know, don't find them, but don't give them help to do it. And they need that money to pay for their expenses. You know, so I understand where the dreamers coming from, because this is the only country they know. But how did we get to this point in the beginning? You know, and not only the Democrats are behind it, but the federal government is behind it, and there's something above the federal government that's encouraging this.
Yeah, that's the globalists, the New World Order people, George Soros. Yeah.
Well, it's bigger than him too, you know. But they want to take over the world, and that's one way to do it. You just mentioned what they did to Europe.
Yep.
Same thing can happen here. All right, Mike, appreciate it, and we'll talk to you later.
All right, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open. Getting on back down to our southern border here, the Border Patrol agents, Customs Immigration people, are now using rapid DNA testing, because one of the ways that these illegal immigrants are being allowed into the United States is they're seen as traveling with children. Oh, we're a family, and please let us in. Well, according to the Washington Examiner, DNA testing has revealed that almost 1/3 of illegal migrants apprehended at the southern border were not biologically related to the children they were traveling with, nor were they cases of stepfathers or adoptive parents. This was the result of a pilot program conducted by Immigration and Customs Enforcement in El Paso and McAllen, Texas. Now, the other week, we had this story about how children were literally being rented to illegal immigrants to cross the border with them, and then once they were over the border, the children were flown back home and presumably rented out again and again and again. Okay. There was a new story last week about how Trump was going to transport thousands of migrants from the Mexican border to Florida, and it did provoke quite a reaction. But it appears that somebody at the corporate media got the story a little bit wrong. Acting Homeland Security Secretary Kevin McAleenan said that, yeah, there were some plans that were being talked about to ship migrants to Palm Beach and Broward, but they were not considered viable or an effective use of government resources. Yeah, if you're going to spend that money to fly all of these migrants someplace, fly them back home. Trump is insisting the plans were never seriously considered, calling it more false reporting. And then he basically said, our country is full, we will not and cannot take you in. Now, Kirsten Gillibrand, who is way behind in the polls for every major Democratic candidate, is trying to charge up her base by offering a wild immigration proposal that would render border laws effectively meaningless. On Face the Nation, Gillibrand announced that she would not detain illegal aliens at all, and she would simply release them into the community. She wouldn't use the detention system at all. They don't need to be incarcerated. So she's playing to the Democratic voters here. Now, here's a story out of Government Slaves, and I've heard this from a couple of places. I'm not sure how real it is, because we've heard nothing from the White House itself. But apparently Donald Trump is considering invoking the Insurrection Act, which would then give him the authority for mass roundup of illegal immigrants, followed by immediate deportation. And of course, if he does that, you're going to have 22 estimated million illegal immigrants in this country who could spark an outright rebellion in the streets. We let this problem get way, way out of hand. But that's the only way it's going to be solved. A wall all the way from the Rio Grande to San Diego, and mass deportations. to get our country back. All right, we're going to take a phone call from Peter in California. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I'm calling from a county, Los Angeles County, that, of course, it's only an estimate because nobody really knows and nobody really wants to know. A county where they say there's 3 million illegals just in our county.
Yes.
Greater LA area, maybe just not the county, maybe LA to Riverside, LA to Santa Barbara, LA to Orange County. I would tell you that's pretty safe. Might even be more. But the old Trump thing that he ran on was that he'd get Mexico to pay for the wall. And I think the only way that it's going to happen is not the insurrectionist law. He's going to have to declare martial law. He's going to have to do it. I mean, real martial law, national emergency. He's got to do it when Congress goes on its hiatus. Under the laws of the National Defense Resources Preparedness executive order that was approved by Congress, they don't have to reconvene it for a year. That way, he can take care of all these traitors that have been trying to coup him, clean up the thing. And what they should do is simply just do what you said. It's illegal to be harboring them, transporting them. If you are, you lose your car. If you're picking up a hitchhiker that's illegal, you lose your car, subject to confiscation, or major fines, or anybody who houses them, major fines. And instead of them sending billions back to Mexico when we pick them up, we should take what we have from them, that we should put the males on a chain gang, frankly, and have them build the wall themselves. And then throw their butts back into Mexico or Central America or Canada or wherever they came from.
Yeah, it does look like this is not going to be solved without some drastic action, although I can't say I'm comfortable with the idea of martial law and suspending Congress for a year. But
I'm not either,
at this point...
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, at this point, that earlier caller was right. There are too many of our own politicians and our own city officials who are fully on board with open borders. And whether it's the, changing the voting demographics in their districts, or because they truly believe in this new world order where everybody is blended together and gets along perfectly fine with each other, which has certainly not been the case to this point. There are too many people who are going along with this. And what has to happen is the American people, first of all, have to be educated to the scale of the problem, and they have to be educated to just what kind of a threat it represents to our country, its economy, our health, and get the American people angry and say, look, we got to clean this country out. They weren't supposed to be here. Let's get them to leave.
You know, Mike, I remember calling in 10 years ago, talking with you, and saying that the government at every single level has every incentive, and has had for years, to underreport the amount of illegal aliens.
Yes.
The Border Patrol doesn't want to, let everybody know how much they failed and stop them. The fact the Congress doesn't want to know how much they failed. Nobody wants to know how they're re-engineering the whole political climate of the country, or and the Democrats and all the people who don't want people to know this. And the estimates, I think it's 22 million. Frankly, I think is low. But Arizona or New Mexico or they're in Ohio, where I was born and raised. If they tried to do something about it, and it's to the point where obviously everybody's spinning off. Nobody, the federal government is being listened to. The federal laws are being adhered to. There's no center anymore. The people are being looted. The lawful legal Americans are being looted, as the other gentleman said, in schools, in welfare and taxes, medical expenses. We're being looted, and they're taking, these people aren't even citizens, are taking away our heritage, our children's future, everything.
Yes.
It's worth fighting over, Mike. It's worth fighting, and it's going to take draconian. It's going to take something draconian to do it, and the only way it's going to do is declaring a martial law and a national emergency. And I hate to think anybody can do it, let alone Trump, this idiot, who has, he has the political instincts of Genghis Khan or something.
No, that's John Bolton.
Well, yeah, right. Sheldon Adelson's errand boy.
Yes.
And by the way, Trump's probably been having his cabinet meetings in Israel. Let's go to Israel and have a cabinet meeting.
I mean, that is just so bizarre. And I'm sure he didn't use his own money to do it. It's one thing for him to go on a fact-finding mission to Israel, but to take his entire cabinet with him so that they can have a cabinet meeting in Israel, I mean, that, to me, it's shameful.
To sign into law something that would take away the First Amendment rights of his own constituents.
Yes.
I mean, it's unbelievable. But they're the people, by the way, George Soros and all the people in the Democratic Party and the left, which, of course, they make up the leadership of to a very great degree, have been saying open borders, let them all come into Europe. Of course, they encourage us to trash the entire Middle East and all of Israel's neighbors. Syria, Libya, Iraq, all these people are flooding into Europe and changing the entire. They want us out of the way, and that's the way they're doing it. As much as they want open borders here and are encouraging and making refugees, as they're having our people make refugees out of millions of other people, they surely don't want them in Israel because they're just not chosen enough.
Yeah.
But everybody else, they can have them.
Yeah, it is. It's a crazy time. It is just absolutely crazy. And, I have looked back over the many years of my life, and I don't recall ever seeing the world in such a state of chaos. Now, maybe it's happened in times past, before I was born. Maybe it was getting like this in the run-up to big mistake number 1 and big mistake number 2. But it certainly seems to be part of the landscape as we basically move further and further into World War III.
Mike, I happened to see something. I don't know if you ran it we're over your site, but where the SAT now is going to have an adversity advantage.
Yes.
They're going to, not only are they going to give a racial spoil system in the education system, but and if they can't just do that, they're going to make it poor as well. So all this stuff, I mean, my kid won't be able to get that, and my kid is mixed. Won't be able to get the adversity thing anyways. And I'm against affirmative action. And she's well able to stand up for herself, grade-wise and all that stuff. But it's just not right. My sister's kids, who are basically middle American white kids, they're not eligible for that stuff.
Nope, they're not.
And it's just it's ridiculous. And because I have to go to all these meetings all the time. This is an issue in my family.
Yeah, Peter, stay on the line. We got to do a break for commercials. I'm going to hold you over, so we'll be right back after these words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Peter in California. We're talking about immigration. We're talking about how do we get the country out of this mess, or are we too deep in to save the United States of America?
Well, Mike, I just want to recount something. We're also talking about, like educational advantage and all that sort of thing. And my daughter, who's 16 and is in the process of, applying for colleges, and she's a very high achiever. She was invited to we got a letter about a month ago from USC, and it was addressed to high achieving African American and Latino, students. And they're all invited to this special thing down at USC, which was on Saturday, where they're going to be given all this instruction as to all the special aid that can be given and all that kind of thing. And frankly, we make too much money to get all that special aid. But my wife wanted to go, and I just had a hard time with it. I go, well, am I welcome? I don't see my name on this at all. I'm not African American. I'm not Latino. Am I welcome at this event? You know? And I said, I just don't feel good about it. You go. And so she go, and I said, take pictures. I mean, it's great that they're honoring achievement. It shouldn't be a color-coded achievement. It should just be pure achievement.
I agree.
And I explained to my daughter, who was a little hurt about it, that her cousins, my sister and brother's kids, they wouldn't be invited to this. But I encouraged them to take pictures. Well, we got the pictures on the cell phones, and there's no Asians there either, right? They're honorary whites because they achieved too highly as well. But yet all these educational spoil systems are going to the minorities. And I don't mind them going. You know, I'm for equal opportunity and I'm for equal justice, but I'm not for equal outcome. You have to work for it. If you don't work for it, you shouldn't get it. And at any rate, that was.
Well, you know, the other outside of that, of course, is that all of these minority students are going to be looked at as employers who are going to say, do I really trust their transcripts from their education? How much of this represents real skill, talent, and education on their part versus being propped up by all these special programs? And there's a lot of people who don't like these special programs for that very reason, because it negates the real accomplishments of minorities. It makes it easy to dismiss them. Oh, yeah, maybe he's doing okay, but you know, he had that you know, that quota system working for him, or he had this other stuff that was helping him.
Well, Michael, there's another, you know, twice a year at this private school that my daughter goes to, which they have these events where they'll have all the African American families with their kids, all the students that go there. And I feel a little out of place when I go there, and then they have these. Last time they had okay, here's the music.
Yeah, there's the music. It's time for us to take a break. Thank you for the phone call, Peter. I've let you go on for quite a while here. We're going to take a break for station identification, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Over in Great Britain, it is looking to be a Brexit Party landslide in the upcoming European elections. Nigel Farage's party is set to win 27 seats at the European elections, followed by Labour with 14, the Liberal Dems with 12, and the Tories with 7 seats. Now, Nigel Farage was out at Newcastle doing a visit, doing a public speech. Somebody threw a milkshake at him. And Farage tweeted after that, sadly, some Remainers have become so radicalized to the extent normal campaigning is becoming impossible. For a civilized democracy to work, you need the loser's consent. Politicians not accepting the referendum result have led to this. And apparently from now on, everywhere that Nigel Farage is going to be speaking, McDonald's has been ordered to stop selling milkshakes. Well, they're still going to have sodas and milk and water. I don't know if that's going to really fix the problem here. Last year, Germany spent a record £20 billion on migration and integrating its million refugees. Actually, more than 1 million. And that was an amount 11% higher than what they spent the previous year. Over at, boy, those poor people of Paris, they can't get a break. Over at the Charles de Gaulle airport, hundreds of undocumented migrants literally took control of Terminal 2 and really hung air travel up here. Here's what was interesting. They were shouting, France does not belong to the French. Yeah, actually it does, because the French people built the place throughout the centuries. All those buildings, the roads, the rail system, the bridges, the French people built that. It belongs to them. And no, you don't have a right to just walk into somebody else's already built up country and say, this is now mine, I have a right to be here. And by the way, these migrants were all wearing black vests, taking their lead from the yellow vest protests. Apparently, the Eiffel Tower had to be closed down earlier today after a man began scaling the Paris monument from the outside. And he apparently, as of this report, was dangling just below the third and highest level of the structure, and they had to send rescuers to get him. All they would say was the climber was a male. Now, a little bit of good news. We're talking about college education debt here. This is a wonderful, wonderful story. Robert F. Smith, who's the CEO and chairperson of Vista Equity Partners, basically was making a commencement speech at Morehouse College in Atlanta, during which he announced he was going to pay off the student loan debt of the graduating class to the tune of some $40 million. And that was very generous of him. And of course, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez couldn't resist exploiting that to get her face before the Twitter fans again, saying college students shouldn't need donations from billionaires to afford college. And on that, I have to agree with her. The cost of a college education has spiraled way out of sync with the rate of inflation, while financial support for legal American citizen students has all but vanished, forcing them into that huge college debt trap. You heard that other caller's daughters, $100,000 in college debt, no job with which to pay it. They basically turned higher education into just another scam. It's just another scam to get people hooked as debt slaves. Especially when you realize college today isn't really teaching usable skills. We're lagging way behind other countries in technical engineering skills. We're leading the world in art history majors and LGBTQ studies. Over at CNN, they ran another one of these booga booga scare stories about gun violence in the United States and school shootings. And somebody called them on the numbers they put on up there because CNN included pellet gun incidents as school shootings in order to inflate the numbers and make them look scary and falsified. But then that's what CNN does. Okay, apparently United Nations human rights inspectors made a cell visit to Julian Assange in Belmarsh to make sure he's being treated decently. And apparently it sparked fury from some of the other prisoners because Assange was visited by the inspectors without a guard present. And a source said, I can't recall another prisoner being afforded the same privileges. Okay, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Meanwhile, over at the Ecuador Embassy in London, they have basically opened up the doors and handed all of Julian Assange's possessions from the time that he was living in the embassy. They've handed them over to U.S. prosecutors. Just said, here, go ahead, take it all. Computers, notebooks, discs, what have you. Discs. I'm giving my age away here. Last week, there was a story that sort of came and went, and it had to do with this lady named Bonnie Kimball, who was working for the lunchroom at this school in New Hampshire. And she gave a meal to a kid who didn't have enough money in his account for the $8 meal. So that's another moneymaker for the school. When I was a kid, you just had your money in your pocket. You didn't have to have an account that was going on there. Anyway, so this chef Jose Andre, he's a world-famous chef. He's known for providing free meals to survivors of natural disasters, and he's basically going to hire this New Hampshire lunch lady and give her a job. So good for him. That's a nice, positive story. Remember how I keep saying it's all about the oil and the oil pipelines? There is a bill making its way through the Texas legislature that would make protesting pipelines a third-degree felony. That's on the same level as an attempted murder. Got to protect those pipelines. Got to keep those pipelines going. Can't have people just saying, I don't want to live next to that leaky thing here. Okay, Candace Owens, she's a black conservative activist, and responding to a Breitbart News story that she has been placed on a list of hate agents by Facebook, came on out saying big tech is trying to subvert a mass awakening. And she says what's going on is that the American people are waking up to this liberal ideology and seeing how nonsensical it is with all this bathroom nonsense. And so Candace is saying these social media companies are desperate to keep that awakening from spreading, to keep the liberal agenda going. Now, Facebook has admitted the existence of the hate agents list, and they said that, yes, Candace Owens had been put on it, but it was a mistake and she's been taken off. So having a high profile can help you a little bit. The liberals are not going to lock the world into the way it is right now. First of all, if you look at the history of the United States, you know, between liberal and conservative, or Republican versus Democrat, however you want to label it, the pendulum swings back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And right now the pendulum is swung way, way, way out over the liberal agenda. And it's time for it to start swinging back, and I think we're starting to see that right now. Okay, Windows 10 version 1903 is about to be released by Microsoft, and a lot of people are saying, well, I'm not really sure after that disastrous rollout of Windows 10 version 1809. And the problem was that Microsoft had grown cocky after a handful of relatively trouble-free feature updates to Windows 10, and even started bragging about how quickly it was able to roll out these semi-annual feature updates. Well, that hubris caught up with them in 2018. And so a lot of people are saying, I don't know that I want to install the latest version. I don't know that it has any new features that I in particular am going to need. So, now in the wake of the WhatsApp attacks, advocates are looking at launching a legal challenge against the Israeli malware maker that made this software. It's called NSO Group. It's deployed by governments that had purchased the software, and it's being used to spy on just about everybody. Now, I don't know that any lawsuits in any other countries would have a bearing inside Israel, but I think maybe targeting WhatsApp for having had it in there. Got to stop using all this stuff. It's spying on you. Every little bit of it. Article out of the Activist Post is asking, have consumers already lost the online privacy war? And I would say we're on the verge of losing it, and we have to start fighting back. We have to learn to do our own code, develop our own secure communications. Networks are under assault from cyber attacks like never before. Frequent massive data breaches. Baltimore is still locked up by their hack attack. And the biggest problem of all, of course, is companies are gathering data on customers without our knowledge to target their advertising and who knows what all else. And here's a big surprise probably for a lot of you. It certainly was a surprise to me. Modern cars are collecting gigabytes of data on you, and it's much more than performance and maintenance. And this is coming from McKinsey estimates, and the cars not only know how much we weigh, but also track how much weight we gain. They know how fast we drive, where we live, how many children we have, even financial information. If you connect a phone to a car, it knows who we call and who we text. And the big question is, who owns and ultimately controls the data? What are the car makers doing with it? Now, the issue of ownership is murky because drivers usually sign away their rights to data in a small print clause buried in the ownership or lease agreement. It's not unlike buying a smartphone. The difference is that most consumers have no idea the vehicles are collecting the data. We all know the smartphones are spying us. Okay, Nest and Alexis collect data, and we've come to accept an implicit contract. We trade personal information for convenience. With cars, there is no such expectation. And it is a little bit of a surprise. What does a car or the car manufacturer need with my telephone list? So what car makers are doing with all this data isn't clear, but it looks like in these hard economic times, they're going to monetize it. They're going to sell it to third parties. And Ford's chief executive, Jim Hackett, has said that, yeah, we're going to monetize all that data we're collecting. And speaking of data they're collecting here, McDonald's, which is out there trying to go ultra high tech, they're going to have new drive-through menus that will change based on the weather, the traffic, the time of day, and get this, your personal information. Now, I've already seen one of these high-tech menus at the McDonald's, and yeah, time of day, you know, you get the breakfast menu, you get the later day menu. I don't know about the weather or the traffic, but this idea that it's going to tune the menu to your personal information, that is a little scary. Not that I go to McDonald's all that often here. Down in South Korea, and actually a lot of other places, computer users are getting upset because support for Windows 7 will end in January. And that's a huge problem for both business and home users that are still running Windows 7. And they don't want to upgrade to Windows 10. They're very concerned about the extreme telemetry that many people consider to be spying. And they don't trust Microsoft's latest operating system. And for many businesses and organizations with a lot of computers, the upgrade to Windows 10 could prove to be a costly affair. So now, as a result of the upcoming death of Windows 7 support, the South Korean government is going to ditch Microsoft Windows entirely and start running all of their government computers on a Linux-based operating system, which for the ordinary business of running a government, you know, with open office and everything, you can do that. I remember a few years ago, the city of Munich in Germany did that. They got tired of dealing with Microsoft, and when it came time for the next changeover, they went with Linux, and they went for several years with that, and then for some reason after that, they went back to Windows. Over in Pakistan, the police are holding a doctor on suspicions that he intentionally infected over 500 people, including 400 children, with the HIV virus. And the investigation began after an HIV epidemic was uncovered in the urban district of Pakistan South starting February, and after over 10 families accused a local doctor of treating their children with used syringes. Now, whether he was trying to start an epidemic so he could make money off the treatments, not the first time it's happened. It has happened before where doctors have literally tried to create a medical emergency in their communities in order to build their business. So let's talk about human-caused global warming, because it's snowing in Arizona, and this is May 20th, all day long. It's snowing on I-40 near Belmont. It's cold and slippery in the Flagstaff region. They're saying if you go for a drive, take warm clothes, blankets, snacks, and water, fill up your gas tank, and have plenty of space on the road ahead of you. It is also snowing in Nevada at Mount Charleston. It's also snowing out in California, up in the high areas. And they're saying this does not bode well for the summer, which also appears to be shorter. And they're saying this trend of shorter summers and longer winters will continue at least into 2025. Al Gore. Alrighty, so right now the media is trying to re-engineer the scare for global warming. And they're ditching the terms climate change, global warming. They're creating new terms like climate emergency, climate crisis, climate breakdown. They're replacing global warming with global heating. Just try and ramp up the rhetoric. We're doomed, we're doomed, we're doomed, we're doomed. Okay. Beto O'Rourke recently claimed humans have only 10 years to act on climate change. Apparently he's trying to one-up Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's gone out on a limb by saying it's 12 years. Mind you, they've been saying that since the 1990s, and we're all still here. And the consensus science from the United Nations does not support any kind of a cliffhanger mentality at all. It's just playing politics. They're playing politics out there. I mean, this human-caused global warming is an absolute demonstration of a conspiracy by government institutions, scientists, politicians, to trick you out of your money and into obedience. And so anybody who says there is no such thing as wide-ranging conspiracies against the people, this is one right there. And we need to remember and study it. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha America, welcome back to our show here. And we have, over the last few years, been talking about the extreme radiological damage that's been done to the Pacific Ocean as a result of the meltdown of the Fukushima reactor. And it turns out that's not the only problem. Now, 40 years ago, the U.S. was conducting nuclear bomb tests in the South Pacific, specifically in the Marshall Islands. And it left a heck of a mess. And apparently, they took the crater from this one test, the 18 kiloton cactus test, and they picked up all the radioactive debris, and they put it in there, and they put this cement dome over it. And in fact, you can see it in Google Earth if you care to check it out. And now, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is sounding the alarm, saying that it appears this dome is leaking, that they didn't line the crater as they originally planned, and the rock underneath that dome is porous. So the dome is 18 feet thick, but it's not lined. And the rock underneath it is porous, and it appears it's been pouring radioactivity into the Pacific Ocean. That's just a little bit weird out there. Okay. Now, we've been talking about glyphosate a lot and its harm, but another very commonly used pesticide is known as atrazine. And there is this new study that has shown it can turn male frogs into females that are successfully able to reproduce. Now, this is something that has been known about in amphibians. In fact, there's even a brief reference to it in the film Jurassic Park about West African frogs in a single-sex environment will spontaneously change sex. Apparently, this atrazine triggers that in the male frogs. And previous work had shown atrazine can cause sexual abnormalities in frogs, such as hermaphroditism, rented lips. And this study established that atrazine's effects are long-lasting and can influence reproduction. Now, atrazine is a weed killer used primarily on corn crops, and it has all of these harmful effects. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Atrazine interferes with the production of the sex hormone estrogen, present not just in frogs, but in people. And they're saying in this study, if you're having problems in amphibians, you can anticipate problems in other animals. So I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm probably going to piss off a few people, but I'm wondering if a lot of this LGBTQ, BFD, LF, MFT, whatever, is from atrazine exposure, where our population of human beings is just having their physical gender messed with. There are so many chemicals that we are exposed to, and we don't really know what they do. We're just now finding about the adverse effects of certain vaccines. We're finding out just now about glyphosate. We know about the side effects from prescription psychiatric medications. And unfortunately, we live in a country where corporations are allowed to just produce and use chemicals like this because they're making money with it. And as long as they make money and they can make donations to their favorite Congress critters, nothing gets done about it. But our world is saturated in all of these artificially produced chemicals. And they don't always go away very quickly. When they were developing Agent Orange, they set up a test zone down on the Big Island, because it was actually worked on here at UH Manoa. And that area on the Big Island, it's still fenced off. After all these years, you cannot go in there or you will die. Dioxin is one of the worst. That stuff just lasts forever. All right, we're going to take, no, I'm a minute away from commercial breaks here. So, yeah, our modern industry, without oversight from our government, has been saturating our country, our ground, our water, our air, our bodies with all kinds of chemicals. And if they develop reactions to them, do they admit, oh, that's a response to being exposed to this chemical? No, they declare it a new illness for which there will be some kind of a treatment. And you look at things like psoriasis, and the way they treat that is to suppress the immune system. And my first question is, was that patient exposed to something that sent their immune system out of kilter earlier in life, like, oh, say, for example, a vaccine? Anyway, we've got to take a break for commercials. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And just looking over here at the Fox News crawl, they don't crawl as much as they used to. Oh, and Trump to top Dems investigate Hillary Clinton, not me. Would love to see it. Don't think it's going to happen. I got an email here. This is in response to the gentleman from Marin County who chastised Tucker Carlson and yours truly for a depiction of the life on the boats. And apparently, he says that negative image has cost him employment opportunities, for which I deeply regret. But I'm just reporting what's going on. But I got an email from somebody who says, I only know in the 80s, but there's a big problem of drugs and upkeep of boats owned by drug addicts. Heroin was a big problem in the 80s, and I only assume it is worse. However, there is also a bigger community of prestige boat owners that have been trying to get rid of the bad boat owners. This has been going on for decades in that area. This is a hit on the undesirables at the marinas, and there are way more good boat owners than bad ones. And yeah, the upkeep on a boat is serious, serious business. In fact, there's a sort of a running joke. What is a boat? It's a hole in the water into which you pour money. And as a matter of fact, the sailboat that Claire and I were married on, going on 25 years ago, unfortunately has rotted away and had to be scrapped. So part of my history that I miss. Speaking of boats, over in Bangladesh, starting today, Bangladesh is going to ban fishing off its coast for 65 days every year to try and boost the depleted fish stocks. And I can understand why they want to do that. There are a lot of places all over where the fish populations are in decline due to overfishing. And they've been talking about it for a very long time. And again, I think we're coming up on a period of massive food shortages. Now, right now, tuna is very heavily regulated so that that population doesn't reduce. And it's a cutthroat business. You know, with in some areas you have to literally win a lottery to get a permit to take a tuna. What is sold in the supermarkets as tuna in those cans very often are other species. Little secret you may not have realized. But the real tuna, that goes to the high-end restaurants, sushi houses, places like that. And there's a lot of food shortcuts being taken by the supermarkets now because of that. And in a lot of cases, the label on the can where it says what's supposed to be in it, that's not what's in it. It's treated as a trade name. We're going to take all of these other fish here, grind them all up, put them in a can, and its trade name is tuna. Same thing with the 100% beef, which beef is a trade name for something that has a little bit of cow in it and a lot of other fillers. And corporations are doing this to maximize profits, to meet demand. Governments are going along with it because they don't know how to fix the problem. So I'm hearing now about this radioactive dome down in the Marshall Islands starting to poison the ocean, or has been poisoning the ocean. Talk about the rising cancer rates. It's being blamed on cell towers and 5G and this and that. Could just be the radioactivity. Because when seafood eats radioisotopes and then you eat that seafood, those radioisotopes can get stuck permanently in your body. And they're impossible to find and remove. And it's kind of like a big gambling game. You can have a radioisotope in your body and live a normal, long, healthy life. Or you could get that isotope in your body and come down with cancer the next day. It's all down to chance if the particles emanating from that radioisotope hit the correct strand of DNA to trigger an out-of-control mutation, which is basically what all cancers are. Okay, so let's go back and pick up a few more stories here. Yeah, apparently Trump is responding to Democrats. Let me give you the backstory on this. The Democrats want more investigations into Donald Trump, and Trump came on out and said, I'm not going to cooperate with any more of this nonsense. You had your investigation. I was exonerated. That's the end of it. And now he's coming on back and saying, when are you going to look at Hillary Clinton? And I would certainly join that chorus. When are they going to look at the Uranium One deal? When are they going to look at that Clinton Foundation? Or is the entire federal government so totally corrupted that it's become an organized crime outfit that will always protect its own and attack its enemies? And of course, no longer serves the best interests of the American people. Certainly serving the interests of the illegal immigrants, certainly serving the interests of the war machine, certainly serving the interests of Israel. But you look around at ordinary Americans, we're being abandoned. We're being neglected. So, okay, article coming on out here. What fate awaits Julian Assange? Well, there's going to be a little bit of a battle because up in Sweden, they have reopened that rape case against him, and they are now demanding extradition from Great Britain. So there's going to be this little bit of tug of war between Sweden and the United States over who gets Julian Assange. My analysis would be that it would probably be better off for Julian Assange if Sweden won. Because if the United States gets him, they're going to make an example out of him. Right now, the rulers of the world are terrified at the grand global awakening. It's not just the liberals, like Candace Owens was saying. All of the governments of the world are starting to realize that people are waking up and realizing what a complete, absolute fraud government is. That we are ruled with lies, deceptions, and propaganda. to keep those that are in power still in power. And we're now hearing all these stories about journalists, even those in the corporate media trying to do an honest job. They're coming under attack. They're being threatened with jail and lawsuits. All the whistleblower protections are gone. Secrecy is becoming the word of the day. All right. Getting on back to the weather, I started the show with a warning. There is a concern of a possible superstorm forming near Odessa that will spawn even more tornadoes. And again, the last count I got was 38 since Friday. And that is going to be ugly. So stay safe. Keep your radio on. The other day, in fact, it was last week, we were talking about this guy named Ron Mugar, who has a home. And he had to leave for a while to go deal with his late mother's estate. And he hired a groundskeeper to keep the lawn mowed. The groundskeeper died, and Ron Mugar never found out. So the lawn grew and grew and grew, and when it got longer than 10 inches, it violated a city ordinance. They started issuing fines on a daily basis, and now the city has taken his home. Civil forfeiture for having too much grass on your lawn. Xeriscape. That's my solution. Either that or AstroTurf. Here's another article from the economics side. Joel Kotkin, I misread that. And it reinforces something I said earlier in the program. America can't ignore the economic threat of a rising China. That's what this is really all about. It's not about the South China Sea. It's not about Taiwan. It's about the One Belt, One Road project. It's about China's manufacturing prowess, which the U.S. cannot keep up with. And it looks like the United States plan is not to try and re-educate our kids to compete in a technological world, not to rebuild our factories, not to invest in new high-tech factories, but simply find a way to bomb China until they're inferior to the United States. Because they've done that before. They did it twice with Germany. Okay, apparently, thanks to Facebook, your cell phone company is watching you more closely than ever. And it does make sense. I mean, you've got this one electronic device you're in constant contact with. You take it with you everywhere. You sleep with it on your bedside table. And anybody who wants to basically come in and spy on you, they've got that device. Especially with that WhatsApp malware from NSO Group, where they could read the data off your phone, and they could install it just by sending a signal to the WhatsApp itself through what they call the phone connection. You don't have to answer it. You don't even know it's happening. It just inserts that malware, and they can take complete control of your cell phone. You know what I think we need? I think we need a smartphone that is built like the old Apple II computers or the Commodore 64, where if you turn them off and you turn them on, it goes right back to the factory preset, and that's good enough for you to use. That's the only way to really be secure. Okay. NASA has just released, or leaked actually, their plan for a lunar outpost. And apparently they are planning a total of 37 rocket launches to the moon. They're going to send astronauts back in 2024. They're going to establish a permanent base in 2028. So they're calling the project Artemis. It is ambitious. And the program's goal isn't just sending Americans back to the moon, but moving toward a permanent presence there that could signal a new era in the exploration of the solar system. I love the sound of it. I think it's ambitious. I don't think it's necessarily going to be an outpost in the exploration of the solar system. We would be much better invested just building a new, more durable, more reliable, if you will, space station. Now, the current one that we've got wasn't designed to last all that long. The outside is all pocked with micrometeorite craters. In fact, there have been problems with astronauts literally shredding their gloves as they move along the rails. Fortunately, we're talking about the outer cover of the gloves and not the inner pressure seal. But it is an issue. But some kind of a space station with a much more robust meteorite shield that literally becomes an assembly point in space for rockets to go to the outer solar system. That to me would seem much more cost effective than having to put a permanent post all the way out on the moon and having to get all the way out to the moon, get down to the bottom of the moon's gravity, and then get back up before you head on out to do what you're going to do. Of course, you know, when Trump won the election, I wanted to be head of NASA, but I think they balked when I told them my first order was going to be ordering all the ground crews to dress up like monkeys every time the spacecraft came back to the world. Okay, another warning here, not just trade war, potential shooting war with China. And General Motors, oh, this is a little scary. General Motors is saying that most new vehicles will be able to get over-the-air software upgrades by 2023. And when you look at some of the upgrades that have come out of Microsoft, I don't think that's a good idea. And just because you can put a computer into something, I'm not sure you really need to. It keeps your life simpler. And they do spy on you a lot. I mean, I've been through the manual for my car. It actually has a crash recorder that's recording everything the car is doing. And then if it detects a significant impact, it stops so the data doesn't get overwritten. And insurance companies have access to that. Now, lawyers probably aren't going to like that because they make their money shouting at each other in a courtroom saying, your client ran the red light and he was speeding and swerving. And the other lawyer says, no, that's completely ridiculous. But with crash recorders, maybe the accidents will get settled a little bit quickly. It's creepy, but I think it's an okay idea. But that earlier story that we had where they're measuring how much you weigh, how many kids you've got in the car, I really don't think they need to know that. One of the things I don't like about the newer cars is they are not designed to be easy to repair by their drivers, their owners. It's another way of forcing a new industry on us all. The authorized automobile repair person. And it just makes everything so much more expensive. And when you add in all the tariffs and taxes and fees and everything, it's no wonder this country is going broke. It's just all set up to suck money out of the people whose labor creates that wealth and put it into the hands of corporate executives and bankers and politicians. And it can't persist for much longer. They're still coming up with new ways we can get money out of the people. The problem being, what happens when the people no longer have money? Don't want to go back onto those credit cards. And sadly, right now in this economy, a lot of people are being forced to turn to their credit cards just to survive, plunging them deeper and deeper and deeper into debt. It's going to have to come crashing down at some point. The money just isn't there to pay all that debt. And that's the way the Federal Reserve is designed. It's designed to produce more debt than money with which to pay the debt. That is the trap. That is the enslavement. And you were sold into that enslavement. The same slavery that we suffered under the Bank of England by a corrupt U.S. Congress and a corrupt U.S. president, who even back then, a little more than 100 years ago, viewed bankers as more important than the American people. And the American people have been paying for it ever since. All right, we're going to take another commercial break here, back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, last segment of our program today. And a couple of stories to wrap up the show with. We've been talking about this outbreak of African swine fever in China. It is now spread to 31 of China's 34 provinces, and China is struggling trying to contain. They're destroying entire herds. They're blocking shipments to stop it from spreading, and importers are filling the gap by buying pork from as far away as Europe, which is boosting prices by up to 40% and causing shortages in other markets. So this is another example of, we're looking at all these food shortages, and some are caused by nature and some are caused by man. But China's shortfall is likely to be so severe it will match Europe's annual pork output and exceed U.S. production by 30%. They do love their pork over there. There's no question about that. Okay, getting back to this idea of censorship here. Microsoft's Xbox will now censor toxic content. Doesn't that take a lot of the fun out of it? So apparently there was a controversy called Gamergate, which led to people harassing and making threats against women. Well, that is tacky, and one should always remember the difference between being in the gamer world and being in the real world. But Microsoft needs to make sure Xbox players don't hear or see content that might turn off the users or scare younger players away. I think that's actually going to come back to bite them. I think people, and again, I don't speak from experience because the only computer games I have are flight simulators, but I think people get into those games so they can live in an alternate reality where they can sort of give vent, as it were. And if you turn that off, then you've turned off the allure of having the game console to begin with. And I think their sales are going to go down. Now, earlier in the show I said, just because you can put a computer in something doesn't mean maybe you should. And this may be an example. Apparently, researchers have developed a pillow with an embedded noise-canceling system that can help people with snoring partners sleep better. So apparently, this would be a case of where we'd get one of these pillows, I'd put it underneath Claire's head, and then she would hear my snoring a lot less. So that's really a little bit out there. And finally, there was this police officer in Louisiana last December was charged with 40 counts of sexually abusing a dog. Apparently, he's been arrested again and charged with 31 counts of possessing child pornography. Where do they find these people? And again, looking at all this bizarre behavior that we're starting to see across our society, is there a pharmacological reason for it? Or is there some kind of chemical contamination that is affecting our minds? Because I don't remember stuff like this from when I was a kid. Anyway, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please share what you learn here with everyone that you know. Please donate to Republic Broadcasting. Please donate to whatreallyhappened.com. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.